people living with HIV deserve pleasure.
What's good people? I'm OBO, and in case you didn't know, I'm the G in LGBTQ, and you're watching It's Just Not Adding Up. So get in here and act like you got some sense. We're about to create some space. As you can see from the title, guys, we are talking about HIV today. And for those of people who don't know what HIV is, what is HIV?
HIV is a retrovirus, often transmitted through sex, but it can also be transmitted through intravenous drug use. Formerly, like in the 80s, 90s, maybe blood transfusions, but very manageable disease, preventable with prophylaxis like PrEP, which stands for pre-exposure prophylaxis, and PEP, which is post-exposure prophylaxis.
What's that?
So pre-exposure prophylaxis is like basically a drug that you can take to ward off getting HIV. Basically, it guards you against getting HIV upwards of like 98 or something like that percent. PEP is a drug that you can take if you feel like you've been exposed to HIV. So within 72 hours or so of coming into contact with somebody that you may feel like may not have known their status or may have been living with HIV, you can actually go to your provider and be prescribed PEP, which stands for post-exposure prophylaxis. And you take the medication for 30 days and, it blocks the HIV virus in your body.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's amazing, huh?
The more you know.
Yeah, episode over. That was it, right?
So where do you think, I know we all understand the stigma around it, but where do you think it truly, truly stems from?
I don't think that we all understand the stigma.
Okay.
Like, I think that, the stigma, surrounding HIV is so nuanced, and I think that people just think that it's like, oh, people are afraid of HIV as a disease state. But it's more about, the judgment around people's decisions in life, what we view as people's decisions. A lot of people view being a sexual minority or being a black same gender loving man or same gender loving man or woman as being a lifestyle choice.
Yeah.
And that's almost like their permission to judge people, oh, you chose that, as opposed to saying being queer, being trans, being gender variant, as well as sexual minority is natural. So I think that judgment that comes along with being a sexual minority or being a person who uses drugs in conjunction with this disease state that was scary in the 80s and 90s because we didn't have adequate medications to treat it. I think that, that kind of mixes together and creates this nightmare of whirlwind of stigma.
Do you think people are under the assumption that people who are HIV positive got it through promiscuity?
Of course, yeah, because that's the easiest assumption, right? Because if you're dealing with something, especially a sexually transmitted disease, you got it because you were dirty, you were nasty. Even people who may not use condoms all the time, or who may have had several pregnancies and made frequent Plan B, feel like if you get HIV or if you get a sexually transmitted disease, that somehow you're different, and not just that you're a sexually active, adult who is trying to have pleasure, trying to receive and give pleasure.
Absolutely. So you've been vocal about your status, but
right.
What did that look like for you? What was that journey like? Was it telling family and friends first and then kind of massaging it a little bit? What did it look like?
It was definitely not what it gives. What it gives is that maybe I got tested one day and the next day I was like, I'm going to save the kids. And it definitely wasn't that. I went through my journey with stigma, my self-stigma. I wouldn't say never. As a child, my mom actually took care of people living with HIV in their last stages of HIV.
Oh, wow.
And I kind of was very afraid of it. When you were interviewed me for the, was it the SOS conference?
Yeah.
The SOS conference, I told you that I had first found out about HIV when I was 6. And, I kind of feared it. So when my mom, who was a residential counselor, like an in-home nurse, took in family members who were in their last stages with HIV, I resented her for it because I was like, oh my God, I'm getting HIV. And then, I had this, angst and anger even towards my mom for, extending that compassionate care. And fast forward, I'm in college and I'm like, yo, I should have never been like that. One of my first friends, disclosed that he had HIV, and then a dude I was dating disclosed that he had HIV. I was like, wow, and I was able to be compassionate and caring towards them. So I felt like, I've arrived, you know what I mean? I'm not I'm able to show love to people with HIV, even though it still freaks me out and scares me. So fast forward to 2007 when I'm hearing those words myself, it's like all of that HIV positivity that I had, towards other people living with HIV. I wasn't able to necessarily like drudge that up for myself so easily.
I can see that.
You can? So
no, I can just see it being very different. I can see that being harder. I think it's easier outside looking in, right? Just say like, oh, this person did it, but then when it's in your court, it's like, oh wait.
Yeah, it's easy to be compassionate and like caring and empathetic when it's like not you. You know, it's like, oh my God, you got this, and all of the cliches come to your mind. But like when integrating those affirmations into your own self, into your own body, can be a little bit more challenging. Yeah. So, from like 2007, even though I worked in the community in Baltimore at that time, working at this place called The Portal, which had, was basically a Black queer men's center. We had programming for men specifically, kind of like Thrive, but, Thrive-like, I'll say.
Got you.
But like I was working around and with people who are living with HIV, I still kind of struggled, and I was really closeted about my status. I literally told one friend, I told my significant others, but I would not share it. Even we had support groups for people living with HIV, and I would sit there as a compassionate ally, but secretly I was a person living with HIV.
Yeah.
And when I moved back to Atlanta, I started working in the community in Atlanta. It wouldn't be until 2014 that because I was working with these young people who are also living with HIV, some not living with HIV, but they were just all so very confident, and I wanted that. I was like, I want to feel okay about living with HIV, and gleaning from them that kind of like courage, and then also wanting to put myself on the line to kind of save them and shield them, that kind of led to me becoming more comfortable in my status, and then eventually co-founding Thrive.
Was there a similar journey for your sexuality? Because even listening to you talk, a lot of that sounds like my journey through sexuality, where it was like, I see all these people in their freedom. I want that freedom. Oh, okay. You know what I mean? Like, I want
to... my journey in sexuality is nuanced and similar, I will say. So there were pre-existing stigmas, right? So like being raised in the church, I felt like, like fire and brimstone to all of the queers, you know what I mean? Yeah. So like, there was a point like that where I was like, maybe like around 11 or 12, where I was like, oh shit, I might be gay. Like, you know what I mean? Like for no specific reason, I'm like, oh my gosh.
So as you're navigating status, you're navigating sexual orientation, you're navigating all these things, right? And also navigating language, what did that like legitimately sound like? Because I'm sure there's somebody who's watching the video possibly who may have just got the diagnosis, may have had it for a while, and is struggling with how to put language to mouth. Even for me, I've encountered people in the dating scene who were positive, you know, and I've been told differently each time. You know what I mean? Like usually right before sex, though, to be honest. Right. I guess they figure, you know what I'm saying?
Like we about to do. Look,
he ain't gonna, leave right now. You know what I mean? Whatever that may look like, but like what does like that language look like for you?
Now, I mean, I will say that I'm atypical. I run an HIV organization. You look up Black gay man Atlanta living with HIV. I'm like on the first page, the second page, the 10th page, just like HIV. So for me, it's an easier conversation. I would imagine that not many people, but some looking at this will be like, okay, yeah, I navigate the space in a similar way. Yeah. What I will say is that disclosure is yours. Like, it's not for anyone else. It's for you, and it's in your own time, in your own words. No one should. Even though I would love to inspire people to be comfortable with who they are, I don't think that we should be just pushing people to be like, be out. You know what I mean? I think that can be kind of precarious. So I would just say, connect with the people who you love and trust, and sometimes when we tell that one person who really matters, everybody else is like, oh, damn, I don't care, you know what I mean? And if you can get to that place of self-love and acceptance where it's like, I don't care what you feel about the fact that I'm living with HIV. It's beautiful, there's a ticker tape parade waiting for you, when you get there, but like in your own time.
Are there any no-nos? Like, are there anything that we shouldn't do? People who are not living with it?
Yeah, like, I mean, othering people who are living with HIV, We're so much more than HIV. You know, like HIV is just a thing that happens to a person. It doesn't become like your whole identity.
Yeah.
Language matters, like you were just alluding to. You know, so being sure to not say things like stigmatizing shit, like sick. And just assuming that just because a person has HIV that they have a compromised immune system, which is not the case. Especially in the days of test and treat, where if a person is diagnosed with HIV, they're rapidly placed onto medication. So, like, if you got HIV on Tuesday and or learn that you have HIV on Tuesday and you're on medications on Thursday, then how compromised is your immune system? A lot of times our immune systems are just as equipped and strong and healthy, if not more, than people not living with HIV. People living with HIV deserve pleasure. So a lot of times I've heard of occurrences and have experienced spaces where, because I was the person living with HIV, it was almost like I was asexual, or kind of like the cautionary, like what I mean, like
Yeah.
like the sweet, like non-sexual presence in the room. And it's like, no, people living with HIV love to fuck, be fucked, suck, lick, all of the things. And for all the kids watching, yeah. So yeah, like we deserve pleasure, and I think that is what you can do, is to advocate for our right to experience pleasure,
Yeah.
and to be completely whole and not victims or vectors of disease transmission.
I'm super mindful of that now. I think because my first encounter with someone who was positive, I think I was trying to do my best to be a good person.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And I think in hindsight, I wasn't that good of a person for
Right.
this person, right? Because I think for me, it's not rooted in pity.
Right.
And I think for me, I try my best to be as like verbally interesting, because I was afraid to have sex.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So I would avoid it at all costs. You know what I mean?
Okay,
because
okay,
I'm like, I don't want to judge you and just run out of your life because you told me your status.
Right.
But I'm also like I'm not ignorant enough to
Right.
then show up to you as an actual person, right? And so for me,
Right.
I tell my friends, like, if you're not ready to receive, like my friend would say, hey, I'm dealing with a guy, he's positive. If you're not ready for it, get out of his way.
Right.
Because it's not fair to him for you to have to deal with somebody who's looking at him like, who's othering him in this way, right? And it's like, he's having this like subpar experience because you want to be a good person, opposed to just being like, I can't handle this, let me go get some research, learn some things, or what have you, but get out of your way because some of the other guys could.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that you hit the nail on the head. Like, we don't need your pity. like I mean, like, it's not that deep. When you look at the numbers of people living with HIV, and then you look at our community of people living with HIV, there are some beautiful, amazingly intelligent, super, super awesome guys. You know what I mean? So, like, don't feel like you're doing us a favor by, like, being in an inbox, or even like giving us the time of day. Like, like you said, move out the way. Like, no, deal with that trepidatious feeling. Do research. Go read a book, but like, don't be complicating this person's life.
No, for sure. I get it.
I'm not gonna act naive. I know that several people who feel like that around living with HIV. I feel like that around race. Like, I don't necessarily prefer to date outside of my race, because I don't want to have to explain shit all the time.
Yeah,
Like, these are chitlins. That is a dashiki.
These are
like, I mean, like, I don't, and people living with HIV don't always want to have the responsibility of like educating people about CD4 counts, and when to take meds, and like, it could be a little stressful, and then also the ease of sex, this being real, like, I don't want to be with nobody that's like, ooh, am I gonna get it? Is this today, Lord? You want to feel sexy and wanted, and completely connected in that moment. So I can understand people who say, like, I would prefer a positive partner. There are people who prefer negative partners as well.
I think all in all, there's the foundation is like, do your own research. I think likewise to anything, right? Like, I don't feel the need to educate you about my sexuality every 2 seconds, like that. And I think to your same point, that's why I kind of at one point I preferred having queer friends. I just didn't feel like doing the things.
Yeah,
like, I just
exactly.
I'd rather not. So what would you say to someone who is feeling uncomfortable in their body or uncomfortable in their skin because of their status?
I feel you. I was you. I am you. Self-efficacy, self-confidence, and esteem is it's a road. It's a journey. It's not like, oh, I've arrived to the party and I'm here and I got, my sash and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
It's a process, you know what I mean? So I feel you. Find your own assets and the reasons why you will never give up on yourself and go there with yourself. I think that we've been raised to be overly humble and meek and to feel like that's a flex, and it's not, you know what I mean? Because if
Facts.
you don't love you, if you can't get to the point that's like, yo, this is my reality, but I'm still a shit,
Facts.
then who's gonna do that for you? And it's okay. It's okay. It's okay to feel like uncomfortable. Like I probably feel uncomfortable 20% of the day, but like I'm not leaning into that discomfort. I'm actually defying it. So,
Yeah.
and sometimes, I do lean into it and I don't leave the house, but it's okay. All of it's okay. Self-love isn't just loving yourself when you're full of the grace of everything and just so full of yourself. Self-love is even loving yourself in those moments where you're like, you know what? Today is shit, and I'm okay with that.
Facts.
Yeah.
Facts. No. I don't know how to close this thing out. Let me see I don't listen to Larry, guys. That's how to close this episode out. But no, seriously, I appreciate the conversation because I think it's necessary to add context to a lot of these things. You know what I mean? Including status, including sexuality, including all things we experience.
Exactly. See?
Yeah. Keep creating space. I will see you guys next week.
Yes.
Peace.
Good job.